I love the end of that video because it's obvious the guy's a little bit awkward, and I think that's how we all feel from time to time. How are you doing this morning? Good, man. We're excited that you're here. In fact, turn to the person next to you, give him a fist bump, and say, I am doing good this morning. Now turn to the person on the other side and say, I'm doing really good this morning. Man, we are excited to be here. This is the weekend that we have been waiting for a long time. Not the launch of college football, because that was stressful last night. but kicking off really our fall groups with this Family Connect event. Obviously, as you came in today, it's a little bit of a different feel outside. We're excited about that. I promise, if you are 4 to 94, we have a hamster wheel that's probably getting set up right now, that if you're 4 to 94, you're going to love this. You're going to make your own snow cone. It's incredible. There's a bunch of activities. The food trucks are here. We're excited about this because we believe that as we get into this society that's getting really, really busy and we're getting really, really connected in certain ways, we're also getting incredibly disconnected in others. We lose that face-to-face contact. We lose a chance to have real relationships. And so this series has been about being intentional about being uncomfortable, because for you and I, we have a tendency to gravitate towards being comfortable, whether it's in our relationships, whether it's in our work ethic, whether it's in our health or our finances, or even when it comes to our spiritual things. We have a tendency to gravitate towards being comfortable and safe, and sometimes that means gravitate towards being lazy in those areas. And so it takes, and we've been talking about this idea, that intentionality is a product of time and effort. And I love this because it's about the time that football kicks off that it starts to feel a little bit like fall. Not in Florida, but like the rest of the country, it feels like football kicks off and it's fall, and we start to get ready. And I want to know this, though, because for my family, it starts in September. But who already has some fall decorations out? There's a couple. Way to be strong. Who's already had at least something that's like pumpkin flavored? A few. Okay, I got you. It's coming. It's coming in droves, I promise. But there's something that we love about fall because it reminds us, again, for us in Florida, it's probably still 5 months away, but it reminds us a little bit of like bonfires and hanging out with family and close friends and s'mores and all of those things that we really, even though our lives are so busy, sometimes we say we want to do those things and they never happen. There's always the promise of that. Because I believe for most of us, we want to be connected. We dream of, man, being connected in some specific area, but then life gets busy and we get tired and we say, I intend to do those things. I intend to make those things a priority. But we get comfortable, and unfortunately, in the process of that, we get a little bit lazy when it comes to our relationships. We get a little bit lazy when it comes to even sharing our faith. We say, man, I know that person that was sick. I meant to go and share my faith with them and talk about Jesus and ask what their relationship with God looks like. But life got busy, and I intended to do those things. And so this series is about looking at things that we should be doing when it comes to our faith. Things that should be important. We began by talking about it. We've been looking at some different kind of barometers when it comes to here's how we measure our faith. These are things that we should be doing, and I think that we know that we should be doing these things. If we genuinely believe that Jesus died and that he rose again and that through him today we have the victory that we sing about, then it just makes sense that that should be the message that goes forward with us, from us, more than anything else. More than people know that I'm a Gator fan, I hope that they know that I'm following Jesus. Like that's immensely more important. And yet we live in this society where it's easy to get comfortable and say, man, I want to play it safe. And when it comes to relationships, last week and this week we're talking about being intentional, being uncomfortable when it comes to relationships. And last week we talked more about the compassionate side of relationships. Because I believe at the heartbeat of what we do, if we genuinely say that we follow Jesus, then we should have a compassion for the people around us. That even as society says we become more connected when it comes to social media and text messaging and sending emojis and GIFs and all those things, and we become disconnected as a people, that even as that's where society is going, that if we're truly genuinely saying that we want to follow Jesus, that we should say we want to go against that trend, and that we value compassion when it comes to relationships. That we don't have time to say someone's my enemy because they're across the political aisle from me, Or someone's my enemy because maybe we don't agree upon certain things. Or someone's my enemy because they cheer for Alabama. I was ready for Alan on that one. I knew he was looking for that one. Like we don't have time to, like we genuinely have a compassion towards people. See, because Jesus, when he's on this earth, he said, by this, the world will know that you're genuinely following me. And what he says next is so key. He says, listen, this is the litmus test. If you say you follow me, this is the litmus test. And it isn't that you go to church. It isn't that you have the right teaching and right doctrine. It isn't that you go on mission trips. All those things are good and valuable, but they're not the litmus test. Jesus says, this is the litmus test. By this, the rest of the world is going to know that you genuinely follow me. Is that the idea that you have love one for another? That literally the litmus test of following Jesus is the way that we love. And so last week we kicked off this series by saying, man, we want to be intentional when it comes to relationship. And again, intentionality is a product of time and effort. And in order for us to put time and effort into this, into having meaningful relationships, we have to have compassion. Now, like I said, it's not easy. We don't gravitate towards those things. In fact, for every one of us, our schedule picks back up. We're starting to find our groove. If we got kids at home, it means that we've kind of had a couple of weeks now to get acclimated to. We're back in school, and then it feels like once summer ended, we got back on this train, and we're going really, really fast again. And because of that, we say we want to have some really powerful relationships. We want to have compassionate relationships. But those type of relationships take time. They take effort. It doesn't happen by me wearing myself out with all the stress and the worry of the day and then saying, man, I'm so worn out. I just want to veg away from everybody else, and I'm just going to go play a game on my phone just to be free of all the drama. It happens through intentionality. It happens by me waking up and saying, what are the relationships right now that I need to pour myself into? And then figuring out a strategy this week to say, because those relationships are key, I want to start to have compassion in those relationships. And I also want to have commitment. Because if the litmus test of following Jesus is the way that we love one another, then the barometer of our success in following Jesus is often measured by the relationships that we keep. And here's just been my observation is that as we talk about relationships, that we have a tendency to hang around and actually gravitate towards people who are pretty similar to ourselves. Whether it's where we're at financially, whether it's where we're at in terms of our likes and our dislikes, or whether it's where we're at even when it comes to spiritual things, we gravitate towards people who are kind of on the same plane as us. In fact, I'm going to do a little social experiment. I don't know if this is going to work out or not, and don't answer out loud. But if you've been coming to Ridge Point Church for more than a month, I want you to think about who are the people you talked to this morning. Because by my observation, most of us walk in on a Sunday morning and talk to the same couple of families over and over and over. Our circle of influence is limited by these are the people we feel comfortable talking to, and there are probably some people who we feel like are on the same level as us in one of many areas. And so here's my challenge as we get ready to go out into our Family Connect event in just a little bit is get out there and talk to some people that you're not comfortable talking to. Talk to some people that may be outside of that sphere of influence and say, man, who can I start to be intentional about when it comes to relationships? Because for every one of us, there should be one or two people that are a step above us spiritually that we're saying, man, I know that I need to grow. And the only way that I'm going to grow in my life is by hanging out with some eagles when it comes to things that are spiritual. Like I want to hang out with some people that are soaring, that have this thing figured out so that I can start to pull some information from them and learn from them. And I also need to hang out with some people that are turkeys. I need to hang out with some people that, man, they know they still have a lot to figure out, but I have something in my life. And some of y'all are trying to figure out right now who the turkeys are, I know. I'm not looking over that way, I'm saying. So we know that there's some people in our life that we should be pouring into. That, man, we say, I know that I don't have it all figured out, but I could start to invest myself into some strategic relationships so that I can start to help them grow. And listen, if there's one thing that's going to help you go in your faith, it's pouring into people that need to be poured into. So it really is about being intentional when it comes to relationships. Last week, we kicked off this series by looking at a passage in Ephesians chapter 2 that we want to pick up with today. We picked up last week verses 11 through 14. And we talked about this idea that Jesus came into this world to literally change the dynamic of how relationships were governed. Prior to Jesus, there's this social divide, there's this religious divide, and the people that Jesus entered into life with didn't get along. There are people that are Jewish by birth and by religion, and there's people who are Gentiles, who are anybody but the Jewish people. And as the church is being established, these two worlds are colliding. And so Paul is writing to this diverse group, that for the first time are together. They're from different social backgrounds, they're from different political backgrounds, they're from different economic backgrounds, they're from different racial backgrounds, and different religious backgrounds. And the church is gathering together, and literally he's saying the only thing that unites all of these social and political and religious differences, the only thing that unites them is Jesus. And that literally through the sacrifice of Jesus, that wall of separation has been torn down. And so Paul is speaking into this divide within the church and saying, listen, because of what Jesus has done, the wall of separation has been torn down. Today we live in a climate where there's social upheaval. There's religious upheaval. There's racial tension. There's economic division. And today we walk in and say Jesus breaks down those same walls. That because of Jesus we're gathered here today. Some because we believe in him. Some because we're just trying to figure this whole thing out. And we gather together and say the only thing that unites us, the only thing that brings us together, it isn't a political party. It isn't our finances. It isn't any of those other topics. It's literally the only thing that unites us is Jesus. And so Paul is writing to the church, and we left off in verse 14 by Jesus breaking down that wall of hostility. And we pick up verse 15, and it says this: how he does that is by abolishing the law of commandments expressed in the ordinances, that he might create in himself one new man in place of the two, so too making peace. He says before this, because of what happened, because ultimately, and Jesus is often referred to as the second Adam. And because the first Adam comes and brings sin, and with sin, he brings a separation between us and God, and he also starts to bring division to the world. He says the first Adam came to bring that, and he brought division. The second Adam comes to tear down some of those laws and ordinances and to bring peace. The law of separation that was set up in the early church in the early religious system was set up because the law said you're supposed to be separate from this. But Jesus comes to break that down. Verse 16 says that he might reconcile us both to God in one body through the cross, thereby, watch this, killing the hostility. If there's one thing that I'd love for us as believers in Jesus to do, it's that because of the compassion that we have towards relationships, because of the commitment that we have towards relationships, is that when there's hostility, that we come in and say to the best of our abilities, because Jesus comes to bring peace into our life. Like that's what he wants to do between our relationship with the fathers. He comes to break down that wall of hostility and to bring peace, that we would say because of what Jesus did to us, reconciling us to God through the cross, because of the hostility that he's killed, that we want to bring the same compassion and the same commitment when it comes to relationships, that I genuinely want to care about people. And because of what Jesus did, I want to be about as best as I can, living peaceably with all people. And it says in verse 17, he came and he preached peace to you who are far off and peace to those who are near. Paul's writing into a religious climate that was a little bit different from our own. He's writing to the people who were Jewish, who felt like because of our background, because the Old Testament prophecies and because of the history that we have, we feel very near to God. And so Paul comes and says, Jesus came to those who are far off and to those who are near. And the Jewish people, simply through their birthright, would have felt near to God when Jesus came upon the earth. Fast forward 2,000 years and a lot has changed. There are people today not because of their birthright, but sometimes just because, well, my family went to church, so I've always felt like I was pretty close to having a relationship with God. And there are others that are here this morning that would have said, man, growing up, the farthest thing from my mind would have been going to church at all. And Jesus comes and says, here's my goal, is to bring peace to those who feel close to God and those who are also incredibly far off. He says, I came to break down that wall of hostility and to bring peace to those who feel close to God and those who feel incredibly far off. And so today, I don't know where you're at. But today, if you feel like, man, I feel like I've messed up so much and I feel like there's a huge wall of separation between me and my relationship with God, Jesus came to bring peace into your world. Jesus came to break down that wall of hostility and to allow you first to have a relationship with God. And then once that wall of hostility is broken for you to allow you to have a relationship with others as well. So Jesus came to break down that wall of hostility to bring peace to those who are close, to those who are far off. Verse 18, for through him we have both access in one spirit to the Father. And then watch this, so then you are no longer strangers and aliens, but you're fellow citizens with the saints and members of the household of God. He says, listen, for those who are near and for those who are far off, it doesn't matter what you think your past history evokes in your life. If you've gone to church your whole life and you felt like, man, I was really close and now I actually have that relationship with God, or if you said, man, I thought growing up, if I walked in the doors of the church, the walls were going to fall down and everyone's going to start to judge me because of that. He says, no matter if you're close or if you're far off, I came to break down that wall of hostility to make sure that you are no longer, and he uses these two words. They're not meant to be put together. They're separate ideas for different classes of people within a particular city. He uses the first the word strangers. Strangers were those who came into a city who had no rights at all being there. They were foreigners who, because of them coming to a city and having no rights to being there, were given no rights at all. And he says, I don't want you to feel like a stranger, but I also don't want you to feel like an alien. An alien in their climate was a person who wasn't a citizen of that city, but they were allowed to be there. And because of that, they were given a limited number of rights. And so Jesus writes, and he said, or Paul writes about Jesus. He says, Jesus came to do this. He came to make sure that you're no longer strangers. I mean, you have no right at all to be there. You're no longer aliens where you're there, but you're not actually a citizen, so you have limited rights. But that you come now as fellow citizens with the saints and members of the household of God. He says, I want you to know this, that because of the decision that you make to follow Jesus, you're no longer a stranger, you're no longer an alien, but you're a citizen of the house of God. Like, that's why I've done what I've done. That's what the power of the cross was all about. And once we understand that, once we celebrate, man, we love to celebrate next steps. For Tony to take the next step in baptism this morning, that's why we exist as a church, to allow people to take those next steps. For some, and you've been coming to church here for a while, and we're in a series where we're talking about the overall vision, and not just understanding what the vision is on paper, but taking the vision from paper and applying it to my life. Man, for some of you, the next step would be to say, I want to join, I want to become a partner with Ridgepoint Church. We do something a little bit different from membership. We call it partnership, but it's saying, man, I want to be a partner. I'm all in. I'm saying I'm a part of what Ridgepoint Church is doing. And for others, it's about creating those intentional relationships. We talked last week about how some relationships are organic, they just develop, and others are a little bit more forced. See, the Bible has a lot to say about what relationship is supposed to look like. And as we become older, we don't gravitate towards those really meaningful relationships. I love that. I have a son, Zach, and he's 5 years old. And Zach at 5 years old, he's really outgoing. He likes to make friends. In fact, we have a lot of people in this room that he likes to be your friend. Like he loves everybody and he makes friends so easy because at 5 years old, there's a purity about their relationships. Zach had his best buddy for the last couple of years. They were in preschool together. His name's Bentley. And Bentley and Zach just love to see each other. In fact, even the principal would see them every day. And she'd say, man, I love their relationship. They can't wait to see each other. And she said, I wish everybody was always like that. Well, this year they started kindergarten and Bentley and Zach are in separate classes. That was a big bummer. My wife made me tell Zach that one. And the thing was once Zach found out, like he was really disappointed about that. And so they were both kind of struggling with that. So this past weekend, we allowed Bentley to come over with us Friday night. He came home with us and stayed the night. And man, they were just best buds all over again. And I was watching them on the couch, just kind of playing games and stuff yesterday morning. And I was like, man, I wish all relationships were that easy. Like they're kids, they still fight about stuff, but then they make up and it's like, I trust you just like I used to trust you before. We get older and there's conflict and we don't forgive quite as easily. And because we don't forgive quite as easily, trust is really hard to earn, and I get that. But I want to see this because the Bible says a lot about what it means to be committed when it comes to relationships. The most meaningful relationships we develop are the ones we're most intentional about. I want you to hear that again. The most meaningful relationships we develop are the ones we're most intentional about. When I was first starting off in ministry as a youth pastor, I was part-time, so I also worked at a school, and I remember going to a school and seeing there was a teacher there. Her name was Mrs. Sims. And all the ninth graders, she taught English for a Christian school. They're teaching from ninth grade to 12th grade, and all the ninth graders came in, and man, they struggled in ninth grade. They didn't like her because she was a little bit strict and a little bit mean. But by the time they got to 12th grade, each of the students, because it was a smaller school, each of the kids gave a speech at their graduation. And I heard every one of the seniors that year, when they gave their senior class speech, and they talked about who they thanked, every one of those students named Mrs. Sims as a person of influence in their life. If we're going to grow, we have to be intentional about finding the right relationships. So some practical advice on friendship. If you're taking notes, write these 3 things down. Number 1, seek out intentional relationships. There's a book of the Bible. It's called Proverbs. It's the book of wisdom. A lot of what we glean from this is going to be written by the person who's considered by many to be the wisest person who ever lived. Solomon writes this in Proverbs 18, verse 24. He says, a man of many companions may come to ruin, but there's a friend who sticks closer than a brother. He's saying, listen, if you're out there trying to seek like a lot of friendships and you think, I'm not going to get really deep in some really strong friendships, but I'm just going to have a lot of friends that are on the surface level. He says, listen, if you do that, if you have many companions, but knowing that you can really get deep and ask questions and challenge each other as we're supposed to challenge one another, then that's going to lead to ruin. But if you find the right friends, there's a friend that sticks closer than a brother. Seek out intentional relationships. Number 2, seek out wise relationships. Proverbs 13:20 says this, whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm. The greatest barometer for how faithful we are in following Jesus is the people that we're doing life with. Solomon writing says, if you're walking with people who are wise, you become wise. But if you're just a companion of fools, you're going to suffer harm. Similarly, Proverbs 27, verse 17 says this, iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. Seek out those intentional relationships. Seek out wise relationships. We gravitate towards relationships that make us feel safe. In fact, for some of you, you know right now that God has put someone on your heart that you're like, man, I've just been observing them. Maybe it's someone at work, maybe it's someone at church. But you're saying, I've been watching how they walk. And just there's a consistency about their life that, man, I wish I could emulate a little bit of what they do. But intimidation is keeping you from having those conversations. And that person is sitting here right now saying, I wish there's someone I could pour myself into, but I don't even know how to begin that conversation. Solomon writing says, as iron sharpens iron, we're supposed to be sharpening each other. And that doesn't naturally happen. It takes intentionality. Number 3, the last one is this. seek out sacrificial relationships. So seek out intentional relationships, seek out wise relationships, and seek out sacrificial relationships. Proverbs 17:17 says this, a friend loves at all time, and a brother is born for adversity. And when we seek out sacrificial relationships, it's saying, I want to look for the type of person who, when I know that I'm struggling, when I know that I need someone speaking truth into my life, that they're going to watch out for that. And they're willing to sacrifice of themselves because a friend loves at all times, but a real brother is born for times of adversity. Jesus says this in John 15, greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. He says, here's the picture. You want to know what a sacrificial relationship looks like? Here's the picture of a sacrificial relationship. Here's how you're supposed to love one another. He says, not only am I going to teach you this, but I'm going to show you this. We tend to hover around people who make us feel comfortable, people who make us feel safe. But intentionality is moving from comfortable to uncomfortable. Intentionality says, I have to leave a message like this. And I have to go home and think this through. See, there's this incredible word that's written throughout the Psalms. It's a word called Selah, S-E-L-A-H. Sometimes if you're reading through the Psalms, you'll see it over on the right margin. And you're like, I don't understand. Are we supposed to read that word or not? And that word literally means pause and think about what was just said. See, for most of us, we want to grow, but for us to grow, there has to be intentionality. There has to be time. There has to be effort. And what happens is we hear a message and maybe we're listening to a podcast. We say, that sounded really good. I should probably do that. And then we get home and there's stuff going on and life happens and the work happens and the intentionality is gone. But intentionality takes that effort on our part to say, I need to block out a moment of time to think through what I've just grasped and figure out how to start to apply that to my life. And I want us to get this, maybe the most important thing that we say this morning. Don't just look for the right type of friend. Be it. It's one thing to say, this is what I'm looking for in a friend. I want someone that has all those attributes that we just talked about. It's another thing entirely to say, I want to be a type of friend who's wise. I want to be the type of friend who's sacrificial. Because if we're going to do this thing called life, it requires being that type of friend. Not just looking for that type of friend, but being it. A couple of weeks ago, and I asked permission to share this story. A couple of weeks ago, I woke up on a Sunday morning, and I normally wake up fairly early on a Sunday morning. I kind of look over my notes one last time and try to get really focused on what we're going to talk about that day. And I woke up fairly early, and I was just beginning to do that, and I got a message that popped up in Facebook Messenger from someone that I went to high school with. Someone that I haven't really talked to a whole lot through the years. We were friends in high school. We weren't, I wouldn't say like really close friends, but we were friends in high school. The guy's name is George. And like I said, we might have interacted a few times. It's been more than 25 years. We might have interacted a few times via Facebook, but it's not someone I've seen in 25 years, and we don't have a lot of correspondence. So I was surprised when I got a message from him. The first thing I thought was whenever you get a message from someone you haven't talked to in years, it's probably what? Spam. That's right. That was my first. I'm like, what? Why? What? But then I got a message from George. He says, hey, man, I just want to tell you this. He said, I've never mentioned this before, but I'm always listening. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, dude, I watch your messages almost every week. And he's like, I just want to let you know. And I didn't even know where he was at spiritually. He's like, I just want to let you know that, man, I've been going through some really, really rough stuff. George is a veteran that has been dealing with a lot of stuff after that. And he said, man, I've been in some really, really low spots, and I just want to thank you for staying true to what you're doing. You're a constant encouragement. And so we interacted for quite some time, and George shared a lot of his story, which was incredible. And I just started to think afterwards, especially in light of this message, that you never know who's watching. You never know who's listening. That right now we're not just called to find the right friends. We should do that. We should be wise about that. But we're also called to be that friend because you never know. I guarantee you go to work tomorrow, there's someone that is struggling at work that's looking for hope. And it's easy to be frustrated with them and to say work is challenging and there's stress, and I'm just going to get stressed out with you. You know, the people that aren't are people that are intentional. People that come in, they say, listen, I know that life is about to get stressful at work, so I'm going to pray myself up before I get there. Because I know in the middle of the chaos, I'm supposed to bring peace, because that's ultimately what Jesus did by breaking down the wall of hostility. It takes finding the right friends. It takes being the right friend. In just a second, we're going to pray. The band's going to close out with a song, and we're going to get ready to head out to this event we've dubbed Family Connect. Again, it's going to be an incredible chance to do a couple of things. First of all, everybody take out in the seat back in front of you, there should be a connection card. Everybody grab one of those connection cards. I think Allison already mentioned this, but the connection card is going to be key. If you would just fill out your name and just the best way to contact you. When we go outside at Family Connect, especially for those who are a part of Ridgepoint Church, especially we've had a lot of families that started getting plugged in over the summer, especially if you're somewhat newer to Ridgepoint Church, but for everybody. When we got Family Connect, the main purpose is for us to connect. That's why I call it Family Connect. But there's going to be different tents set up that are going to be hosted by our family group leaders. Man, as you go around, have some conversations, go to those tents. At each of those tents, there's some water for you. So if you need a bottle of water, it's going to be hot out there. Grab a bottle of water, have some conversations. Talk about what their group is like. Talk about when their group meets and all that stuff. If you think, man, now not every group has a lot of room, so we're going to figure that out. But if you say, hey, I'd really like to find out more information about this group or about groups in general, just give that connection card to that family group leader, and they'll take it from there. So just want to take the Connect card. If you find someone that, hey, I want to find out more about this group or groups in particular, give it to that person. There's also going to be inflatables, bounce houses. We also have two other tents, actually three other tents that are set up. One that is our RPC Kids tent. If you're the parent of a student that's from birth to fifth grade, we're going to ask you at some point during this morning, afternoon, to go by that tent. Ms. Tanya is asking for everybody to kind of update the information, make sure we have the right grades, and make sure we have parent permission, all that stuff. So if you have a child in that, just stop by. She has a form for you to fill out. If you have a student in youth group, or if you're in youth group age yourself, there's RPC students tent set up. They have all kinds of information about what's coming up. Would love to connect with students as well as parents, RPC students. There's also ladies Bible study, so that's not one of our regular family groups. It's a group that meets here, but there's ladies Bible study tent as well that's over on that side as well. And all that stuff's going to be going on. You're free to hang out for as long as you want. Again, at each of the tents, there's bottled water. We have two incredible food trucks that we're partnering with that are out there. They're getting set up. And we'd love, these are local businesses that we want to support. So just throughout the time, everything else is free. The snow cones are free. We already kind of prepaid for those things. But support the two food trucks that are there. They've come out here, and they're here to serve us. It's been great to be able to work with them, have some conversations. Rachel's helped hook all that up, so thank you, Rachel, for talking to the food trucks. And all that's going to happen. But the main thrust of this is for us to be able to connect with one another, and especially connect with people who are outside of that sphere of people we normally talk to. So let's go ahead and pray. Once we get done praying, the band will join us, and we'll wrap up the service. God, I thank you that because of what Jesus did in our life, that wall of hostility, that wall of separation has been torn down. And that today, because of his sacrifice, we have direct access to you. But God, that is not only giving us freedom to have a relationship with you, it's also setting us up to have freedom to have a relationship with the people around us. And so God, I pray right now for the person who's still separated from you, that maybe they came in this morning with a bunch of questions and not sure about what this was all about. I pray today they'd begin that relationship and they'd be willing to take those next steps. For those who made that decision, haven't taken that step of baptism like Tony took this morning, I pray today's the day they say, I want to take that next step. Or for those that want to join a group, or for those that want to say, man, I'm ready to become a partner with the church, that they'd let us know those decisions and they want to take those next steps in truly following Jesus. But God, whether it's something that we formally do as a part of the kind of the system we have in place, or whether it's something that we just do organically in having healthy relationships, God, I pray that something that was said this morning is digested into our life, that we allow it to marinate for a little bit, and we figure out how can I be intentional about being committed and compassionate when it comes to my relationships. God, give us that passion, give us that sense of purpose about our relationships. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.